Hello and welcome back to the GCSunscast. It's the round 20 episode following the horrific loss to Melbourne. Joining me, as always, is my co-host Tom, who is now live from Brisbane. How's the Brisbane weather treating you, Tom?
Yeah, it's been a bit too hot for my liking. 25 degrees. Well, my phone still thinks it's in Melbourne, so this morning I checked the weather and it was 9 degrees in Melbourne at 9 o'clock this morning. So yeah, I'm in the right place and thawing out. Spring is in the air.
Yeah, it feels that way up here. It's been mid to high 20s. It's going to be a hot game against Richmond, you would think, up at Metricon. So we'll see how the Richmond Tigers handle the hot temperatures of the Gold Coast.
Yeah, well, I think we're probably in for another thrashing there, but you never know. You never know. Maybe they can't handle it. North Melbourne were complaining about it against Brisbane, so we'll see.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping for a more competitive display this week. But first, let's not jump ahead of ourselves. We've got a big episode that's mainly going to focus on the Tom Lynch saga that has emerged since our last podcast. It's been a huge talking point in the media. And we've been copping a lot of bashing from a lot of media personality about the way we've handled the situation as a club. And we're going to have a look over some of those things and just assess why some of these lunatics in the media are doing what they do. Because I don't think they fully understand the situation that's going on. And it seems to be more about Tom Lynch and less about the club. Well, anyway, we'll discuss that later. But before we jump into that, let's just touch over the Melbourne game. Gold Coast played Melbourne down at the MCG on Sunday afternoon and got thumped by 96 points. Melbourne kicked 21 goals, 17, 143 to the Gold Coast 7 goals, 547. The leading goal scorer for the Suns was Sexton with 5 goals. Now, is there anything you could take from that game, Tom? Because I'm struggling to find anything.
Well, Sexton's radar's back on track. He seems to kick a pile of behinds one week, and then the next week he kicks a bag. I was happy to see him. There's not many highlights, let's face it, but happy to see Sexton actually, do that. I mean, he's playing for his career, basically, isn't he? I mean, there aren't that many guys on the list who could be considered to have, run their course as Suns. He's one of those guys who, if he was to play poorly in this run home, he might find himself in the trading block or even get delisted. I mean, it wouldn't be an easy decision, but kicking 5 goals doesn't save his spot, but it certainly does him some good. Let's see, I think we talked about before we hit the record button that you take away Melbourne's first quarter, their 9 goals, and the Suns look okay. The Suns look competitive for the rest of the game. So, that's what I take out of it. They knew they were in for a hiding, but they just didn't let it balloon out to 150, 200 points, which it easily could have.
Yeah, well, I agree with you on the Melbourne result. That could have been a big hiding, and we were expecting that, to be honest. I wasn't really paying too much attention to the game. I had it on the TV, but I was too busy keeping up with the complaints and the whinging on the big footy board, as that was more entertaining. But as far as Sexton goes, I think he's done more than enough in the last month to warrant at least an extra contract for next year, if he isn't signed up already. And, the ball's in his court. A career in football doesn't last that long, and you've got to sort of take the opportunity when you've got it to maximise its potential. We did suffer another injury in that game, with Peter Wright injuring his knee with a medial strain in the first minute of the game. He took a mark, slid awkwardly with his opponent landing over his leg, and struggled to get up, struggled to kick the ball, and then we didn't see him again. So it just continues the Gold Coast injury curse. We've now had about I think I counted 17 or 18 players on our injury list, most of them done for the season. And just from listening to the commentators for the game, a lot of them didn't even know half the Suns team. So it just sort of shows how deep we're batting at the moment and why we are copping such horrendous performances.
Yeah, it does make you wonder. First of all, I think we need to be realistic. So the age of the players, as you say, these are skinny little kids. I mean, if you watch a replay, in 5 years from now, you watch a replay of guys like, even Brody this year, who's bigger than he was last year. In 5 years' time, he's going to be a machine. He's going to have all those pre-seasons under his belt. He's going to be as fit as he possibly could ever get. And with those skills and that run, he's going to be a top player. So he's an example of a player who's sort of gained a bit of size. Well, when we look at someone like Charlie Ballard, didn't play on the weekend, of course, but he needs a couple of pre-seasons to bulk up and broaden his shoulders a bit. And if he doesn't lose any skill, he's only going to gain. So we always go in looking like the sort of smaller team. Now, I know that we've got the new gym facilities and whatever, but I don't think that either of this season or last season that we really got the benefit of our players being able to use it as theirs. It only came in the pre-season last year, and they didn't get a full pre-season with the gym. And then of course the Commonwealth Games interrupted everything this year. So I'll predict that next year and then the following year that the players will be fitter, stronger, because it's not like we're getting all the same types of injuries, but there've been a few knee injuries, haven't there? And that sort of tells you a bit about what kind of training paddocks have they been training on, because it hasn't all been at Metricon, right? So it hasn't been at the top standard. And our pre-season was pretty wet, wasn't it? So, the question has to be asked, was the playing group completely prepared as well as other clubs?
It's a very tough question, our injury curse, isn't it? It's not just strains or hamstrings or muscle related. A lot of it seems to be contact related. So a lot of the time the players don't have any control, neither do the medical staff or coaching staff or football operations. It's just it honestly just feels like it's a curse. I mean, we've spoken before about are we being cursed because of the old Christopher Skase lighthouse scandal?
Yes, which there was 30 years to pay it off, and of course no one stepped forward to pay it off, and I think that was last year. So
I think it actually ends this year.
Yeah, something like that. So it's
so I mean, if we'll know next year. Fingers crossed, we have a good run of luck of injury next year, then we can put it down to this curse has been ruining Gold Coast and based AFL for the last 30 years.
Yeah, the old Carrara curse, eh? Look, it's one of those things. I think that as the playing group average age gets older, and that may not happen this off season, because if we've already lost Rosa, and we look like we're not going to re-sign Barlow, and it sort of looks like Richatelli's going to extend, but I wonder. If he feels like he's got another year, then by all means. And Harbrow hasn't been extended yet. We hope he does. Which leaves Hanley the only other older guys. So you'd expect Harbrow and Hanley to stay, but if we lose 2 or 3 of the 30-plus players, our average age doesn't go up, because we're going to bring in all these 18-year-olds again. So it's the youngest list in the comp, or one of, and it's not getting older each year, because each year players move on, the experienced players between the sort of 27 and 30 something. I mean, Ablett leaving dropped the average age by about 4 months. So anyway, so point being, the strength of the players gets better. I believe when players are younger, they tend to miss time through injuries that when they're 26, 27, they wouldn't miss time. Would you agree with that? Players playing with injury when they're a bit older and fitter?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like playing a guitar. You play guitar for the first few months and you're getting calluses on your hand, but a couple of years down the track, you're still playing guitar and the skin on your hands are a lot tougher and stronger and they can deal with it. So I guess it's kind of like that. The body, the muscles just get stronger and tougher and can deal with the workload.
That's it. And then some guys just never do get there. So they get flushed out of the system. I mean, a lot of people disagree with me, but I think maybe Harrison Wigg might be one of those guys to flush out because we didn't get any value out of him this year, and he was injured the whole time, so we didn't even get any full value out of him. It emerges now that he's signed up when he arrived, and he arrived back from off-season overweight, and then he hurt himself. Well, they're saying now he's killing it in the gym and he's really fit and whatever, but it doesn't do us any good. Maybe he'll come back and be a good player. Maybe he'll get bloody injured again in the pre-season next year. And, you hear about these players who are injured for just years and years and years, and I don't think we can really carry somebody like that. So, if there are players who are on their sort of third or fourth injury-disrupted season, maybe Tom Nichols needs to be moved on. If he's recovered, then terrific. If he's going to have a full pre-season, then keep him. But if he's just got ongoing injuries and he's just going to be taking up a spot, we've got to get rid of him.
Yeah, I mean that's a bit of a ridiculous claim. I mean we've only got half a dozen games out of Pierce Handley since he came over to the club.
It's been cursed.
We do suffer injuries, but I don't think we can turn around and say, no, that player's injury prone and he's no point having him in the side anymore.
I'm saying if. I'm not saying it's got to happen. I'm just saying you get to the end of the season and these guys who haven't played all year, if their program of rehab is going well and there's no reason to think that they're going to go into pre-season with an injury, then keep them. But if it's not looking great,
I think it's more of a concern of the quality of player the Gold Coast Suns have attracted in trading or bringing into the club since our initial list build. I mean, you look at some of the free agents and the blokes that we've brought in. You've got Greg Broughton, you've got Tom Murphy, Matthew Warnock. Those players didn't last very long apart from a few cameos. We all know what happened with Nick Malcheski. It wasn't really until we got Lyons and Jared Witts that we sort of struck a bit of gold with our recruits from other clubs.
True that. Even then, Lyons is showing what the reason why he was in and out of the Crows team, being dropped for a game against Melbourne because they didn't believe that he could cover enough ground. So, I would say that's a challenge for him, and it's not a knock on our recruitment. But if they'd be great players. I mean, Witts is a ruckman who has needed a lot of time to develop, and he's still got a fair way to go. But he's got that potential, so it's great.
On Witts, he had more hitouts than Max Gawn in that Melbourne game, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
so
you are.
Theoretically, Witts beat Gawn, one of the best ruckmen in the competition. Now, Gawn may have had more of an impact around the ball, but I mean, Witts is a damn good ruckman, and he constantly gets overlooked by the media and the industry as just being an average ruckman. I think he's a great ruckman. He's not the best tap ruckman or hit out to advantage, but he gets first use of the ball most times.
Yeah, look, he's done well to improve those things over the duration of this year. And he's, and as you say, he's beaten Gawn 40-30, which is a pretty solid effort. In the overall clearances, Melbourne have just edged the Suns, so he still hasn't. We still haven't got the full advantage out of it. But we've had games where he's beaten the other guy by 50 odd hit-outs, and we've lost the clearances. So he's bridging that gap, and Gawn's the best ruckman in the comp. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. So but Witts isn't in their company yet. But he goes up against them and occasionally produces a performance that at least matches them. I can't recall the last time Witts was outclassed and outmatched. He has sacrificed, he's had games with 60 plus hit outs, but we've lost the clearances. And so having him get in there and win 40 and give us 29 clearances, and especially at the stoppages. Earlier this year, we couldn't win the stoppages, and we actually beat Melbourne at the stoppages. They flogged us at the centre clearances, and that's a bummer. Even though Witts won the bounces, but I think that's Witts all over against someone like against Max Gawn. Gawn's going to take the other guy out, so Witts might win the tap, but he doesn't have real control over it. You know what I mean? So, and Melbourne's midfield, when it's 4-on-4, Melbourne's going to beat most teams in the centre bounces. So, you give that one up. And Witts captained the team as well. That can't be overlooked. We saw Tom Lynch and arguably Stephen May's performances on the field go down slightly with the burden of captaincy, but Witts didn't. He just led the only way he does. He didn't do anything really that differently, but he's a leader.
Anyway, let's get back on track. The only other injury to come out of that game is apparently Sean Lemons, who's injured his hand that he had hurt earlier in the season with a fracture. Now, scans have shown that it's not fractured, so there's still, they're just sort of immobilising the hand, and they'll assess it later in the week. So there's a chance Sean Lemons misses this week. But in brighter news, we have May returning from suspension. It looks like Thompson and Swallow will also return from injury, and Braden Crossley. So
awesome.
We're getting some personnel back into the side to help make us competitive against Richmond. Now, the only other sad news is Rosa has announced his retirement with a season-ending syndesmosis injury. So he delivered a really classy letter on the Suns site today, and it just really showed the sort of character that Rosa is and the champion and well-spoken man that he has become. We only had him for 3 years at the Suns, but I really, really feel he's brought so much effort and leadership to the club. He's leaving the club a far better place than when he came.
Yeah, look, apart from the initial free agency signings that the Suns brought to the club in the first season, Rosa's really the best sort of since then. So, you got Riscatelli, Ablett and Harbrow and others who came in at the very beginning. Apart from that initial haul, I think it wasn't until we got Rosa that we hadn't really gotten. He's not elite, but he's an AFL player, and he would compete to be in the best 22 of any club in the country. So we were lucky to get him, and it was a job well done to get him, because you kind of knew that he was going to be a 3 to 5 year prospect, and to get 3 seasons, I don't know exactly how many games he's played, but it must be about 50. I think he's led by example. He's a bloody lovely shot for goal from the right, deep in the right hand pocket. He nailed one for the Suns earlier this year, and I watched him do the same thing in the NEAFL 2 weeks ago, and I was just thinking, gee, he's got a bit of height to him. He could be the the secret weapon that we've been looking for in the forward line, to sneak him up there and take a few sneaky marks and kick a few goals that we've been looking for goal kickers. What do you think about Rosa? Do you think he'll pack his family up and head to more sort of traditional AFL territory, or do you think he might be sort of considered by the club to be someone to keep on some sort of coaching role or admin role, and potentially play a bit of NEFL?
Yeah, it could go either way. Rosa's got the trust of the playing group, so I can quite easily see him fitting in there. But I don't know enough about Rosa's origin to determine whether he'd rather pack up and move down to Victoria or back over to WA. So we'll just shelve that one there for now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've been considering the idea that perhaps we could have a couple of our veterans available for some sort of club position and play a bit of NEFL, just so that it's an alternative to making our list longer. We can just have guys who aren't AFL eligible, but they are NEFL eligible, and they're being paid a reasonable wage to do a job around the club. But as you say, we don't really know anywhere near enough about whether that's how that came about with Eddie Sainsbury. Could potentially be the fact that he was playing in the NEFL for other clubs up until quite recently. So he was probably still registered in some way. So we'll maybe we can contact the club and find out about that.
Now it's time to get stuck into the big issue, the TomLynch TimeBomb. Now, we all knew this was going to happen from as early as the start of the season. We didn't know when the time bomb was going to go off, but we knew something was going to explode, and it would be either extremely fantastic, full of confetti for the Suns, or full of shrapnel and guts and gore. And essentially, it's turned out to be the latter, with Tom Lynch coming out last week and declaring his intention to leave the Suns. Now, this has sparked a whole bunch of debate through the media circles in the AFL, and I've never heard the Suns talked about more than I have in the last week, so there's been a lot of information to get through. So we're going to break down some of these comments that have been said in the media and how we feel the Tom Lynch situation has happened. So, I mean, let's start off by how we feel about the Tom Lynch situation. Personally, I'm not too fussed about it. I sort of expected it as coming. I think as a Suns supporter, we'd grown accustomed to it going to happen this way for at least the last month, more likely the last 2 to 3 months. The way it's happened has been very, very upsetting. Going off and talking to other clubs mid-season so publicly is very... It just dents the side's confidence. I mean, he's not just a normal player like Lin Jong was a couple years ago touring the Collingwood facilities. He's a captain of an AFL club, and a captain has to represent something. I mean, it's not just a title that he walks around with and say, yeah, I get paid more, apparently I'm a captain. He's got to... He shows leadership. He's got to be there and help nurture the young people. He's got... You know what? When it comes down to it, the AFL haven't really had... So the Suns AFL team has never really had a proper captain. So we got Ablett come in the early years, and he'd never been a captain before. One of the reasons why he signed the contract to come, and he paid him a lot of money, was that he was adamant, I will only come if you make me captain.
And yes, he was a teacher for the younger players. And yes, he led the team. He was the best player in the team. He was always getting the most, winning the best and fairest and this and whatever. And up until his injury, that he sort of led by example. But you wouldn't say he was the best captain in the AFL. I mean, his body language was...
Sorry, Tom, I'll just cut you off. That AFL sound, that noise, was my phone going off. Andrew Gaff has just had a 8-week suspension.
Holy moly! Should we get onto his player agent while he's feeling the need to be loved?
Yeah.
Give him 1.8 million to come to us. We can make him captain.
I'm sure he wants to escape the spotlight in Melbourne and Perth at the moment, and as most people know, AFL players just sort of blend in the environment up here.
He could tour the facility. Look, it is something to talk about, because obviously everyone tonight will be talking about it. I could say that I thought it was going to be 6 or less, so 8 weeks surprises me. What about you?
Yeah, I was thinking about 6 weeks, but 8. I completely understand why they wanted to make sure he was ruled out for the rest of the final series.
Yeah.
So 8 weeks, a bit of a surprising one, but yeah, I mean, our own Dean Solomon was the last player to be suspended for 8 weeks for punching a bloke, I think. So anyway, let's get back on topic. Tom Lynch. So I wasn't sure what you were saying. I wasn't listening. But do you want to pick up where you left off?
Oh, look, the whole situation, the whole thing, for a long time, we've been looking for a captain to really lead the club with heart and passion. Ablett was a good captain, but he was flawed. And I think everyone knows it. As I said, negative body language. We were getting flogged a lot of the time, and Ablett would still get 3 bloody Brownlow votes. Well, he couldn't be faulted for effort, but it was never ever a good look to see Ablett remonstrating with the younger players or jogging off, shaking his head and just not having, not enjoying his footy, basically. So when Ablett said, look, I want to leave, and they said, well, you're not going to bloody leave this year, and because you've asked to leave, we're going to take the captaincy off you. That was great leadership. That was like, rightio, you've taken the one thing off him that he demanded to have in the first place, and we're going to give it to our two rising stars, Tom Lynch, Stephen May. We better give it to both of them, because Lynch is not so good in the media, and we want to take the pressure off these young guys. We'll give them both the job, and they can come up together, and then we'll see what happens when contracts come to be extended. Well, guess what? Last year, Stephen May, new co-captain, and he said, I'm not going to sign a contract until I'm satisfied of all of these things. Signs his contract. No one thinks less of him. In fact, I thought more of him, because he committed, and he stood his ground and stood his principles. Tom Lynch has come out this year and said exactly the same words, but it wasn't convincing or believable. It seemed like he was just saying the same thing, wrote. Every time someone would ask him, he would just say, yeah, no, I haven't made a decision. No, I'll let you know. No. And then now we find out he's been sneaking around talking to other clubs. Good riddance. Not a real captain, not showing the leadership. Let a lot of people down, and I hope a lot of the younger players did let him know what they thought about it.
Yeah, well, comments from Chris Judd about, and several other media reporters I might add, about how it was disgraceful that the Gold Coast Suns stripped him of his captaincy and basically kicked him out of the club. Well, that's not right. First of all, they haven't kicked him out of the club. It's not a smart idea to have someone that's supposed to be a leader and supposed to be planning for the future of the club, who isn't now going to be in the future of the club, sitting in on strategy meetings and important meetings, and then turning around and telling the younger guys how they should be going about their football. Because he can't do it. How can anyone look up to him and trust him at the club, knowing that he's only in it for his own motives, and he's going to be out as soon as he can? So stripping him of the captaincy is the only option. I don't understand how it's even being discussed. I mean, I don't want to, compare AFL to football, but it's so off. I don't want to compare football to war or anything, but it often gets compared in the times around the Anzac Day clash. But if you're off fighting a war, you're looking up to your superior officer or whatever. You're following them, into battle through dangerous situations. You don't want them to be turning around saying, "Yeah, I'm going home tomorrow, so whatever."
Look. Chris Judd did what Lynch is doing, so Judd would say that. In fact, if Judd came out and criticised Lynch for being the captain and wanting to keep the captaincy, then that would have been hypocritical. So, Judd's Judd. In fact, it's funny how in this generation of players who've played in the last 15 years, Judd, when he started to slow down and injuries were sort of taking their toll on his career, he started getting suspended for dirty behaviour like chicken wing tackles and stuff like that. So I'm not so sure that Judd's really got that much currency. His opinion in this is pretty predictable.
Well, I mean, you can say the same about blokes like Malthouse and Grant Thomas, but then you've got those blokes that are serious reporters, as it's in their livelihood. Blokes like Damien Barrett, Jay Clark, John Ralph, and even Queensland's own, Gold Coast's own Andrew Hamilton, just laying into the club over things like this. I mean, Hamilton's posted an article saying the players were berated by David Swallow after they questioned and berated Tom Lynch over his motives for leaving. Now, since then, player managers have come out and said, well, actually, no, that's incorrect. So I don't know where Hamilton's getting his information from, but someone's lying there. Now,
I think we can put a lot of the News Limited journalists, their style of journalism, where they come out and they speculate something and they say it as fact, and they cite so-called, sources. In this case, he was citing Rodney Eade. But what does Rodney Eade know about the current situation at the Suns? And this is a coach who was sacked and didn't even bother to address his players. So what's he got to say about the player addressed by Tom Lynch? I mean, I'm sure that some of the details will come out eventually, but it's none of our business, really. It was probably fairly emotional for them all. They're all pretty young men, really, and there would have been some people who wished him well and other people who were dirty on him. What happens behind closed doors in that situation, I mean, we saw it play out in the first quarter of the game against the Demons. The team's demoralised. They're disappointed in a guy who's supposed to be their leader, who not only is never going to play for them again, but they're never going to see him in Suns colours at the Suns facility. Even there's talk that he might not even use the Suns facility to do his rehab.
Well, that's his choice, but the Suns have an obligation to complete rehab process, considering he was injured while working for them. But
they don't have an obligation to let him sit in the coach's box or to sit in on team meetings or to do anything like that. They're basically, the only thing that the Suns owe Lynch is a bit of rehab time and access. But he's not a very confident young man. And he's not likely to, roll up in his BMW or whatever he drives and do his 30 or 40 minutes of rehab every day at the club when he can do it anywhere.
No. So let's touch on the players questioning him. From my understanding, despite reports from Andrew Hamilton and several other journalists, from everything I've heard and sources I've spoken to, the players weren't berated by David Swallow after they spoke to Lynch. And what they spoke to Lynch about was questioning his handling of the situation. My understanding is several people at the club were under the impression that Tom Lynch would be going at the end of this season, dating back as far as the start of July. So that's around 3 to 4 weeks ago. Now, I would imagine you could look at maybe Stuart Dew or Mark Evans, blokes that are higher up in that club, would be aware of what's going on. And they may have kept it quiet from others as to not leak out. And that would include the playing group. But when Tom Lynch is caught red-handed meeting clubs like Collingwood and Richmond, then it's in the public. They can't deny it. They can't escape it. And then you've got your playing group and staff questioning this bloke's loyalty. Now, I'm sure the club would have rather know Tom Lynch's decision and kept it quiet until the end of the season. But because of Nathan Buckley's screw-up, the club has been forced to act and forced to have Lynch come in and address the playing group personally. So, he can sort of save face. And, I mean, as captain of the club, it's the least you can do is personally confront your teammates and tell them that you're leaving. And then his teammates have every right to question, well, why are you doing this? Why are you leaving in the way that you're leaving? Like, stand up and be accountable for what you've done and the way you've handled it. Now, Tom Lynch isn't, as we know, he's not the greatest at public speaking, and that also comes from being a bit shy and a bit sensitive and careful about how he speaks. And obviously this sort of set him back a bit, having people question him and how he's done things. And he might feel a bit guilty about what he's done, but in the end he's done it now. He's got to own it and he's got to move on with himself. Now, I completely understand that he's looking after himself by going to Melbourne and playing with a successful club, but the Gold Coast aren't required now to look after him. They need to do the best interest for the club, and that's being forgotten amongst all this media thing. It's always about Tom Lynch this, Tom Lynch that, not Gold Coast. Not Gold Coast need to look after themselves. Gold Coast need to be more competitive. So, I mean, all the best to Tom Lynch, but from now on, it's all about Gold Coast and what Gold Coast need to do. If Gold Coast have to climb on the heads of Tom Lynch and his manager and people around him to be successful, then I've got no problem with that. So be it. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Look, I think it's terrific that the Tom Lynch situation has been everyone is crystal clear what's happening. The thing that we obviously need to now, well, it's only speculation, but the thing we need to know next is, what's the AFL going to do about the Suns? We keep on losing these top players every year. Last year we lost Gary Ablett, best player in the history of football. The year before that, it was Dion Prestia and Jaeger O'Meara, both first round draft picks, top draft picks, and going back to our end of our second season when we lost Caddy, from then on, it was obvious we were going to start losing these young players. Now they seem to be staying for a bit longer, but we've now only got 7 foundation players. So clearly the club wasn't set up, and we did have a podcast about this previously, but it was worthwhile mentioning. We had a poorly set up playing list from the get-go, and now we've lost one of the foundation pieces of that setup and one of our captains, and we've lost the previous captain, and we've lost all the guys who potentially would have been coming through to lead the club in the best years of their lives. Is the AFL just going to sort of, give us pick 3 and wish us luck, or do we really have to push? What is satisfactory compensation, not just for Lynch, but the big picture?
Oh, look, I didn't really want to go into this, but you've asked the question, so we will. My opinion is the Gold Coast the AFL are planning on giving the Gold Coast a priority pick anyway. Now, the rest of the AFL clubs, they're all pushing for it to be an end of first round, as is reported in the media so often. Gold Coast are going to get an end of first round pick. But as David King and I think one of the other commentators on AFL 360 last week suggested, Gold Coast, if they match that offer, this compensation pick of pick 3 for Lynch dissolves. Now, that doesn't make sense.
No.
So here's the solution for the AFL, and I really hope they listen or someone gets this to them. But they tell the Gold Coast Suns, look, match the offer for Tom Lynch and force a trade with another club. We will give you pick 3 as a priority pick instead of an end of first round pick. Therefore, they are giving Gold Coast the priority pick they need, a much needed priority pick, at the same time as allowing Gold Coast to trade for up to 2 first round draft picks, potentially top 10 draft picks as well, for Tom Lynch. Now,
one of them could be a future top 10, you know, a future pick, or it could be a speculator, because, you know, whilst it didn't work out so well for us with West Coast, you know, that if you know, I guess we're looking at teams in the top echelon anyway. But if say Collingwood, you know, sells the farm to get Tom Lynch, and then they come 13th next year, well, we're going to get a pretty good pick.
Definitely,
right?
I think we can only take probably 4 or 5 picks before we have to start taking our academy players, and we've got at least 2, maybe 3 of them coming in the draft. But you've got the AFL give us the priority pick that we very much need in number 3, and we know that if they were to give us an end of first round draft pick as a priority pick, that's not going to be enough. That's not going to be enough talent to get the Gold Coast out of the hole they're in. So essentially giving us that pick 3 allows us to actually get an extra 2 first round draft picks, better than an end of first round pick priority pick. So giving us that pick 3 is essentially giving us an extra 2 draft picks.
Yeah. I totally agree with you, and I think when it comes to the compensation, because we can't separate the two, we need to get compensation for Lynch, and essentially letting Lynch go to a top club and they get him basically for free is just, it's bullshit. It's not equalisation. It's basically giving you know, Hawthorn has always been the Habs. You know, they've always paid for their premierships, and nowadays the success they've had means that they can lure players there, and they seem to be getting the best out of free agency. Well, Richmond's just won the flag, and they've got the most members of any club ever. So they're swimming in money, swimming in profits. Again, they're an attractive proposition. And Collingwood's Collingwood. They're one of the top 4 teams in the competition. I'm a little surprised that there aren't other teams, even Carlton, even though they're on the bottom of the ladder. They've been around forever. They've had a lot of success, and Tom Lynch would slide right into their forward line and enhance their prospects immediately. So, and they've got the money, they've got the list space, they've got everything. But anyway, you know, we've got to match the deal, and we've got to get in my opinion, we've got to match the deal, and we've got to get proper value for him. As you say, that pick 3 disappears. It's incumbent on the AFL to be consistent and do what they did with the Lions years ago, and give us that second top 5 pick, whether it be 3 or 4 or 5, depending on where we finish.
Yeah. So let's move away from that. We don't have much time left. I want to touch on the Stephen May captaincy ultimatum. Now, it's being reported that the Suns are basically telling Stephen May, if you don't sign a new long-term contract, we're going to get rid of you at the end of this year. Now, from my understanding, that's not the case. It's actually an ultimatum on the captaincy. So I would imagine it would be along the lines of, Stephen May, if you don't sign this contract, a long-term contract for the next few years, we can't guarantee you'll be the captain of this club next year, because we can't afford to lose a third captain in as many years. it's all about saving face for that club. I mean, they want Stephen May desperately to be captain, but to avoid us from having to go through another scenario like this, which is only going to be worse than what it is this year with Stephen May, they've got no other choice but to say, look, if you're not going to sign a long-term contract, we can't afford to have you as captain. We're going to have to give it to a David Swallow or Jared Witts, a Tuke Miller, because the club can't afford to go through this again. Nothing against Stephen May, it's just the club's current predicament, and the club has to come first. I'm sick of players coming before this club.
Yeah, I agree with you. And all I'll say about it, because I love Stephen May, and I don't believe that he's going to leave. But what I do think is that the last contract they signed him to, he wanted 2 years, and from memory they put $800,000 on the table for him. I think they've got to up that. I think they've got to. He's got to be the marquee player, the captain, the guy who's getting paid, if not the outright most, then the equal most. We need to pay him, and he'll play, and I'd like to see a long contract too. So, I agree with you that he should, if he wants to wait until June, July next year, I don't think he can, in good faith, want to be captain. And I think he would, if that's his decision, then I think he would just take it with good grace. I also think he loves being captain, and I think, he's from the Northern Territory, mate, and Melbourne Press say that he wants to move back to Victoria because he finished high school there. He hated high school there. Everyone was racist. People didn't know he was Indigenous, and they'd say things in front of him that would just have him, raging. He came up to the Gold Coast after getting zone drafted up here, and he's made the best of it. When he was a bit younger, he was a bit of a hothead and didn't, he wasn't. There's the Camp Brown incident and all that kind of stuff. But as I said, the main thing with Stephen May is I believe he deserves a big fat offer. If we've had all this hullabaloo about how much money we're going to give to bloody Tom Lynch to keep him here and there's not even enough for him, he's rejected the offer, well, pay Stephen May that money and you watch him sign up for 5 years and be the best captain we'll ever have.
Yep, 100% agree. Okay, well, we're coming to the end of another episode. Let's quickly talk about the Richmond game this weekend on Saturday at 2 p.m. Metricon Stadium. There's not too much to talk about. We believe we're going to get another flogging. It is Richmond. They are the best team in the competition at the moment. However, who knows what the Suns pull out. They did beat Sydney a few years back, and we're on our home turf. Hasn't traditionally been good for us this year, but fingers crossed we're due for something, and Richmond's due for a loss, to be honest.
They are. Richmond haven't been all that convincing lately. They seem to be plotting their, they're probably going to come first no matter what happens. In fact, Richmond might end up coming on top of the table by a few wins. That's the way it's looking. So I don't think we'll catch them napping, but I don't think they're going to come out with 100% firepower. I think they'll do enough to beat us. Mind you, if we're dreadful, then they won't be able to help themselves. Richmond, that's the kind of team they are. They can put on 5 or 6 goals in 5 minutes. Look, with Richmond, it's always about how many players. They tend to win most of their matchups, and when they do that, then they start getting that flow on footy where they can just bang it forward and whatever. Look, we've got a few guys coming back, haven't we?
Yeah, as mentioned before, May, Thompson, Swallow, Crossley, with Wright out and possibly Lemons out. There's still room to bring in a couple more players. Maybe Ainsworth is right to come back in. Lyons maybe comes in. So we can hopefully go in with a much more stronger team, a much hardened team. In the end, I think we all just want the Suns to be competitive. We want to see a glimmer of hope there, and if they can maintain competitiveness for at least half a game, I think a lot of people will be happy with that. I'll be at the game. It's my birthday the following day, so I'll be enjoying a few drinks and hoping to get a win.
Awesome.
I did put the call out to us for a free upgrade to the lounge, but haven't heard back yet, so I don't think that's going to happen.
Look, we won by 2.5 goals against 2.5 weeks ago. We won against the Swans, so anything can happen because the Swans have come back since then, and they're charging back into the top 8. They're staking a claim to even looking at top 4 potentially, and they've got a hard run home, but. You'd be a very, very bold person to put any kind of money on the Suns to beat the Tigers, even though the Tigers used to be our bunnies.
Yes, the famous Carmichael Hunt goal. I'm going to a home game, not expecting too many Suns fans, and that's the depressing thing. Hopefully I'm proven wrong, but...
Yeah, maybe we'll get a few Commonwealth Games volunteers.
At least in the members bar, I should mainly be surrounded by Suns supporters, and I can drink my favourite Pirate Life beer. So,
yeah. No, they should. The old Big Footy forum people should shout you a couple. I reckon. I won't be there this weekend, but I'm aiming to go down to see the Q Clash.
Yeah, well. We'll have to catch up for that Q Clash, but we'll save that for off the air chat. So rounding up, all the best for the Suns this week. Hopefully we can be competitive against the Tigers, and I'll keep an eye out to the Facebook and Twitter channels and Big Footy. I might put something up and organise a meet and greet or something at the Richmond game, maybe at half time or something, if people want to catch up and have a quick drink before we go back and watch the Suns be competitive, fingers crossed, against the Tigers.
I think there's an after-match function as well. So everyone, if you see Shane, what are you going to be wearing, Shane, so they can buy you a beer?
Oh, God. It's a day game, isn't it? So I won't be wearing a jumper.
No.
I'll probably blend in like every other nuffy there with a Suns polo and a Suns hat.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, well, it's been a big week, and I think we've got a few answers now, but we'll have to go over that in more detail next week.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks for joining me, Tom. Thanks for listening, viewers, and or listeners, I should say. Oh God. All right, well, this is falling apart, so let's hurry up and end this. This has been a crazy episode, interruptions and everything. All right, go Suns!
Yeah, see you next week.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the GCSunscast. If you like what you hear, please get involved in our small community over on bigfooty.com on the Gold Coast board. Chat with myself, Sunners, and Tom, 17er, as well as dozens of other Gold Coast fans. You can reach me on Facebook or Twitter at 32bitshane or email me 32bitshane@gmail.com with any queries. Leave a comment or review on iTunes and SoundCloud or a donation on Patreon. Just search GCSunscast. Donations are in US dollars and will go towards reliable tech and hosting the podcast so listeners have access to our earlier episodes. Thanks again. Go Suns!